We're in our eighth week of our Throne Room series. The subtitle is Visions and Revelations of the Lord. We get this from 2 Corinthians chapter number 12, where Paul begins to talk to a local church about this category of visions and revelations of the Lord. And so what was Paul referring to? He was referring to this category of experiences that men and women of God have had for centuries, all the way since the first people that ever interacted with God, that they would have visions and revelations of the Lord, that the eyes of their heart, their spiritual eyes, would see the Lord, and that they would have an encounter with him, visions and revelations of the Lord. On the day of Pentecost, in Acts chapter number 2, Peter declared that the age of the church would be an age in which ordinary Christians like you and I would be able to enjoy the spirit expressions that the prophets enjoyed in the Old Testament, namely prophecies, dreams, and visions. These were special kind of ordained men in the Old Testament who had prophecy, dreams, and visions, and they would reveal the character of God to the nation, these prophets and prophetesses. But now in the New Testament era, we all have Holy Spirit in the way that those prophets did, and therefore we all get the privilege of being able to experience these encounters with the Lord through things like prophecy, dreams, and visions. And so it's very right for a church like ours to talk about these things. It's not a higher life, or it's not something overly aspirational. Just in the last 12 months, the people sitting in this room have had hundreds of visions from the Lord. And I don't know, that might sound extreme in some houses, but it's not in our house. It's a daily occurrence that we have dreams from the Lord, and that in prayer, the eyes of our heart see things that the Lord is showing us. And so this is a normative part of the Christian life. It's part of the inheritance of the saints, that we would get to go through life with eyes that can catch a glimpse of what God is doing, that he would show us with the eyes of our heart what he's doing and what he wants us to see. And so Paul said to a New Testament church, he said, if you have been raised with Christ through salvation and baptism, keep seeking the things above where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. We're supposed to seek that place. Keep thinking about things above, not things on the earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. So we have citizenship in another place. And the way that the Bible talks about that place is a throne room. It's a throne room. And so we're going back to the Bible, and we're looking at each of these passages and saying, what do we learn about that place? Because it has so much bearing on our life, as we'll even see as we near the end of this series. All right, so today, we're going to talk about Daniel and the throne room court. Is that a good band name, John? And not as good as Ezekiel and the mobile throne, but Daniel and the throne room court. Here we go. Say it again? It's the first album. That's right, first album. Daniel and the throne room court. Let me give you a little context, a little setting for Daniel here real quick. I put this same picture up when we talked about Ezekiel. Now we're talking about Daniel because the setting's the same. Because Ezekiel and Daniel and Jeremiah, these three prophets of the Old Testament, all lived right around the same time. So there was a siege on Jerusalem. One of the watershed moments of the history of Jerusalem was this era between 605 and 586, when Babylon, the reigning world power at that time, led by a general named Nebuchadnezzar, who would soon become the king, when Babylon came from the north and came down south to Jerusalem and sacked Jerusalem, led many of its citizens captive to Babylon, and finally in 586 destroyed the city completely. It was in 605 that Daniel, probably a teenage boy, was one of the boys who was led captive. He was taken from Jerusalem by the Babylonians to live in Babylon. Daniel was of royal seed, which means that he was from the lineage of David. And he was being groomed in Jerusalem for kind of royal affairs. And so he was an exceptional boy who was taken, who Babylon said, we want to repurpose you. You're smart, you're talented, maybe you're good looking, maybe you're strong. We want to take you and we want to use you in Babylon. Something unique about Daniel is Daniel was a dreamer. Daniel was a dreamer, and he was a dream interpreter. Most of the prophets in the Old Testament got their visions or got their messages primarily in vision, but we know that Daniel got his messages in night visions, which are dreams. And he was such a prolific dreamer and such a prolific dream interpreter that he kind of lived out Proverbs 18:16. A man's gift makes room for him and brings him before great men. This gift that God had given Daniel made room for him, brought him before great men, and eventually allowed him to be like second or third in command in each of the world powers that led in Babylon. Pretty remarkable story in Daniel. So this is then the first dream of the throne room that we've encountered in our series. Everything else in our series so far has been a vision, but this here is a dream of Daniel's that we're going to focus in on today. A dream that he had of the throne room. The setting of Daniel 7 is around 556 BC. So Daniel is now a 70-something-year-old man. He was a teenager when he was taken away from Jerusalem, but now Daniel is in his 70s, and he has this dream. Are you ready? Here we go. Daniel chapter 7. Let me tell you, I have a lot of expectation for this service right here. I think the Lord's going to say something or do something very special this morning. I won't go into why I think that, but I'm anxious to see what it is. I hope I get an inkling of what it is even before we leave the service today. So if you have a word to share with somebody, you make sure you share it. If the Holy Spirit is prompting you to do anything this morning, do it. Okay? Take a step and do it. If the Lord's prompting you to do anything, I think the Lord has something special this morning. Okay, here we go. Let's read Daniel 7. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel, 70-something-year-old Daniel, saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in his bed. Then he wrote down the dream and told, I just got totally into Dr. Seuss mode there. Visions of his head as he lay in his bed. I watched The Grinch last night. Okay. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. All right? You should write down your dreams. You should document your dreams. If you don't know where to document your dreams, we got a dream journal. There's one lonely one back there on the back. Make sure you get one before you leave. He wrote down his dream. Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. And four great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another. As I looked, thrones were placed. Now, we just skipped forward a little bit in the dream, just to let you know. As I looked, so he saw these four beasts, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames. Its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000,000 served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. Whew, that's a big throne room. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. And as I looked, the fourth beast was killed, and its body destroyed and given over to be burned with fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. I saw in the night visions, it's continuing, lots of different scenes in this one dream. You ever had any dreams like that? Where it's like, then this happened, and then I went here, and then I went here, and then I had this conversation. Okay, that's what he's doing here. I saw in the night visions, it expands, and behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man. And he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion, all blessing and all honor, glory. Okay, is given dominion and glory and a kingdom that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. All right, let's walk through 6 primary elements to that vision, and then we'll ask the question that we've been asking every week, is what does this particular vision teach us about the throne room? All right, here we go. Number 1, 6 main elements to this vision. First, we have a divine storm. The dream starts where he's looking at the water, and this storm begins, this chaos storm begins on the water, and he knows, something godlike is about to happen. Remember, this is exactly how Ezekiel's vision of the mobile throne started, with a big storm on the sea. And this is exactly how Job encountered the Lord in the whirlwind. Remember, the great whirlwind. So this natural phenomenon that's going to get his attention and say, oh, something big's about to happen. So we have a divine storm. Next, we have the four beasts. The four beasts. One looked like a lion. One looked like a bear. One looked like a four-headed leopard. That's cool. And the other one was a great beast, a fearful beast, a terrible beast, like a Godzilla beast, unlike anything that he had seen before it. All right? So the first beast represents Babylon. The second beast, the bear, represents the Medes and the Persians. The third beast, Greece, with the leopard with the four heads, is Greece. And the fourth beast is Rome. And so this is a big dream, because what Daniel is getting is he's getting a history, a future history, a prophecy of what the four world empires that would exist and some primary attributes of those empires. So he's living in the time of Babylon, but after Babylon, the next beast, the next world empire that's going to come along is going to be the Medo-Persian Empire. Daniel would also serve under that empire. But then after that empire lasted for, a century or so, then you'd have the Grecian Empire. And Daniel's going to prophesy a lot about that Grecian Empire led by Alexander the Great. Remarkable things. And then after that would come the Roman Empire. This is the fearful beast, the terrible beast, the Godzilla-like beast. And this beast would be worse than all the rest. The way that it would persecute the righteous, the way that it would persecute Christians, all of the Colosseum and all of the crucifixions and all of the burning and the Nero era and all of that. They persecuted the people of Yahweh worse than all the other empires. So that's why this beast was so terrible. Next, number 3, what does Daniel see? So that's kind of the context of this throne room vision, is what's going to happen to these beasts. Next, the Ancient of Days. This is a unique title, only one time found in the Scriptures, the Ancient of Days. That's who's sitting on the throne. Now, I think you could say that when John said he saw the one who is, who was, and who is to come, that's kind of the same as saying the Ancient of Days. It's the eternal one. The eternal one. What did he look like? Well, first of all, this should be understood as God the Father. So when you read the Ancient of Days, just think God the Father. His clothes and his hair were white, probably showing like wisdom and honor. He sat on a fiery throne chariot, the same thing that Ezekiel saw. The throne chariot, the chariot on wheels, meaning that God's throne room can go anywhere in the earth, so anybody can experience God in his fullness anywhere on the earth. He had a fiery throne room chariot, and then a river of fire proceeded out from the throne. How wild is that? A river of fire came out from the throne. Now, fire does two things in the Scriptures. It purifies and it consumes, right, or destroys. And this is not a purifying fire that Daniel sees. This is a consuming fire. It's a destroying river of fire. A beast is going to be thrown into this fire. And then millions of angels ministered to him. 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands. That's a lot. Ministered in the throne room to the Ancient of Days. Next, we have the court with books. The court with books. Now, when I say court, don't think about a room, think about a people. Because the court in the Scriptures is a group of people. A royal court means a royal group of people. And then the books. So in like end times passages, you have the book of life and then the books. The book of life is the book that you were secured into the moment you got saved. You were kind of imprinted forever into the book of life. The books is this concept that all of the deeds of man are being recorded and remembered in heaven. And those who are not in Christ will be judged according to those works, according to what's in the books. So Daniel sees a court, a group of people with Yahweh, and then the books of all the deeds of this nation, this empire. Number 5, main element, we see a son of man. A son of man. Of course, we know that the son of man is Jesus. This is the favorite title that Jesus had for himself. He called himself the son of man over 80 times in the Gospels. Over 80 times. Now, the Messiah is not referred to the Son of Man anywhere else in the Scriptures, only Daniel 7. So every time Jesus said, I'm the Son of Man, he was talking about Daniel 7. He's talking about this dream, this picture. This was a sacred text to Jesus. He probably had it memorized. A very sacred text. I would say maybe one of his favorite passages in the Bible because he referred to it all the time. In fact, on his last night on earth, he quoted this. He said, you will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven to Caiaphas. And how did Caiaphas respond? With his drama, blasphemy, and he tore his robe. He knew exactly who Jesus was and what Jesus was going to say, but he's a melodramatic Caiaphas, the high priest. And so he tore his garb and he said, crucify him, But Jesus quoted from this dream. This dream was sacred to Jesus. Jesus had many titles, Emmanuel and Messiah and Christ and Son of God and Son of David and teacher, rabbi. He had all these titles. But the title that was most precious to him, that he used over 80 times, was the Son of Man. He says, I'm the one in Daniel's dream. I'm the one at the end of that dream. That's me. And that's how he self-identified. What a dream that Jesus would think so much of it. Lastly, number 8, last kind of major element of this is this ascending with the clouds. So a son of man. So when we say a son of man, we should just think of a human. Just think of that, a human. A human. A human is in the throne room receiving such honor and glory. And how did that human get there? He ascended with clouds into the throne room before the Ancient of Days. Now, if you remember, how did Jesus leave this earth? Pastor Ken says he flew. And in Acts 1:9, how did he fly? He flew when a cloud covered him. Acts 1:9. The disciples are all there with Jesus. He's already been dead and resurrected. He's in his glorified body. And a cloud comes from heaven, surrounds him, and takes him up. That's from the earthly view. Now from the heavenly view, a cloud in the heavens brings the Son of Man to the Ancient of Days. Do you see? So you should kind of connect the two. A cloud bringing Jesus to the throne of the Father for a very pivotal transaction to occur. It's a great dream. It's a great chapter. It could take weeks just to teach the intricacies of this chapter, but we will just simply ask ourselves this question. What does Daniel's vision teach us about the throne room? You ready? We got 4 things this morning. Number 1. The one on the throne is a judge. The one on the throne is a judge. Now, we say often here in this house that God is always revealing himself, his nature, to a generation, to a nation, to a family, to an individual in every season of their life. So Ryan and Kelly, God is revealing himself, an aspect of his character and nature to you all in this season. It might be the fact that he is peace. It might be the fact that he is provider. It might be the fact that he is a savior or king. It might be the fact that he is always present. Right? There's some aspect of his nature that he's revealing to the Beckmans and to the Anayas and to the Maskies. Right? There's an aspect of his nature that he's revealing to America right now, a predominant aspect of his nature and his character. And so a good question for you to ask in your prayer closet is, Lord, how are you identifying yourself to me? What do you need me to grab a hold of your character in this season of life? Well, in Daniel's season, to him and to his generation, the Lord was revealing himself as judge. This was a primary characteristic. And it would make sense that this would come to Daniel, because you know what Daniel's name means? It means God is my judge. The word Don is judge. Dani is my judge. Daniel, Elohim. Elohim is my judge, or God is my judge. So he had a prophetic name. Hallelujah. How many of you have a prophetic name? Do you know? Yeah, you do. Very good. Okay. A few of you know it. He had a prophetic name, and he was to reveal a certain aspect of his characteristic to his generation. And in a dream, he sees it most vividly, that God is a judge. Now, what do you think of when you hear the word judge? Do you think of this? If you think of that, that's not a horrible thing to think of, but it's an incomplete thing to think of. If you have a good understanding of the American judicial system, it doesn't necessarily mean that you know exactly what it means for Yahweh to be judge, because Yahweh's not an American. He's definitely not an American judge, right? He doesn't have a black robe on, and Yahweh's never seen with a gavel in his hand. All right? So that's an incomplete understanding of what a judge is. So in the Bible, what does a judge do? A judge exercises authority, administers wisdom, restores divine order, vindicates the innocent, rewards the righteous, punishes the wicked, and gives the final verdict. Judges were one of the primary roles of leaders in the nation of Israel. There was judges, there was priests, there was kings, right? And so that's what a judge is, according to the Lord. A little bit more than somebody who strikes a gavel or makes a decision. The understanding that comes to Daniel when he sees Yahweh as judge in the throne room is that the judge of all the earth allows evil nations like Babylon or Medo-Persia or Greece or Rome or Iran, or you fill in what nation do you think is evil? Russia, or I don't know, who else is a boogeyman nation, right, in the country, in the world? Iran and Russia, to Americans, are two of the worst, or China, right? Iran, Russia, and China. These are like the big three bad guys, so, if you listen to the news always, in our world today, towards America anyway, right? The judge of all the earth allows evil nations, or nations led by evil men, let's say that, to exist with oversight, limitations, and expirations. So Daniel won't despair that the nation that he's leading is wicked and does evil. The reason why Daniel won't despair is because he gets this glimpse of the throne room in which he sees, Yahweh is very involved in these beasts' existence. He knows which one's coming next. That means he knows what time this one is coming off the scene. And he's throwing one of them right now into a fiery river before his throne. So I see. So the Lord is very active. He's in control. He's sovereign. This nation is not acting independently of Yahweh's rule. Yahweh, the judge of all the earth, is at work in the lives of nations and wicked despots in the world. Okay. He's at work. He's in control. I can release a little bit of control there and not think that I need to get all up in a frenzy about these things because the Lord is at work, right? Daniel, you don't need to be consumed with Fox News for 5 hours a day, right? Thinking that by watching it, somehow you're involved in this story. You're not involved in the story, right? And if I watch Fox News 5 hours a day, I'm not involved in the story. And my input doesn't matter anything more. Just because I'm more informed doesn't mean I can do anything about it, right? I can't do anything about it. But I trust the one who can do something about it, who is doing something about it. And how this would have comforted Daniel's heart. The judge of all the earth allows evil nations to exist with oversight, with limitations, and with expiration dates. What does this free us to do, having this knowledge? This frees us to stay focused on the kingdom. While nations will rise against nations and kingdom against kingdoms, and there will be wars and rumors of wars. Okay, there's all of that. But Yahweh's on his throne. The judge is on his throne. He has an entire court helping him. Okay? He doesn't necessarily need me to be in a frenzy about that. He needs me to focus on the kingdom. I'll focus on the kingdom while he focuses on those nations. I'll focus on the kingdom. And Daniel is free to focus on the kingdom with this revelation, with this understanding. This, though, should encourage and empower us to pray about global affairs. Not to worry about global affairs, but to pray about global affairs. We are not powerless, and there is no reason to despair. We have the ear of the one who is sovereign over people, nations, and empires. In this house, when we gather as a people of prayer, as a house of prayer, when we dedicate ourselves to praying on Wednesday nights about affairs that are much bigger than us, affairs that we feel so insurmountable to, like a particular sin over the nation, or a particular conflict thousands of miles away, right? Or wicked despots that we'll never get to meet and that we wish were out of power. As we gather to pray, we have the ear of the judge of all the earth, the Ancient of Days, and he says, I'm open to suggestions. Talk to me about it. And so while I have no direct access to be able to help some global affair thousands of miles away, I have the ear of the one who's in control and who's sovereign. Ah, yes, he's the judge of all the earth. I can trust him. And I'm free. I'm free to focus on the kingdom because he's got this covered. And he's inviting me in to talk to him about these affairs. He's giving me his ear so I can pray with him and partner with him for what he wants to do. The one on the throne is a judge. That's encouraging. Number 2, the throne room is a courtroom. Throne room is a courtroom. Now, typically, I only say what this does teach us about a particular point, but in this, I'm also going to point just a couple of points about what something this doesn't teach us. So, Micaiah, remember a couple weeks ago, the prophet Micaiah revealed to us that the throne room is a war room. The throne room is a war room. But now, Daniel adds to it, the throne room is also a courtroom. A courtroom. Now, the concept of the court of heaven has gained a lot of focus over the last 10 years because a brother by the name of Robert Henderson wrote a book 10 years ago called The Courts of Heaven. Because of our inner healing ministry especially, we've been asked about that particular book and that strategy and that understanding of viewing God through the courts of heaven. We've been asked about that a lot, and we've never particularly engaged in the strategy that Robert Henderson lays out concerning the courts of heaven. But I thought, and we've never talked about it publicly, I thought I would just say just a couple of things about this particular book right now. So on the outset, let me say that Robert Henderson is a brother, and I have read this book, and there's so much good stuff in the book. And so why don't we fully endorse the teaching or the strategy? It would just because of these couple of points. First, the subtitle there is Granting God the Legal Rights to Fulfill His Passion and Answer Our Prayer. Granting God the legal rights that he needs to fulfill his passion and answer our prayers. That's an interesting subtitle, isn't it? The basic premise of the book is this. The reason for unanswered prayer, so Robert teaches, that is in agreement with the Word of God, is that something legal is resisting you in the spirit world. If we realize this one truth, principle and secret, we are on our way to our answers and our breakthroughs. So if you want something good for your family, and you're asking for it, and it's according to the will of God, and it's not coming, then he says the reason for that is because something legally is resisting you. That there's some legal action that we can find out about in the courts of heaven that is being held against you, that's restricting you from receiving this particular blessing, is sort of the premise of the book. He goes on. He says Christians are to present cases in the courts of heaven. And Daniel 7 is a primary framework of the book. Christians are to present cases in the courts of heaven, and once we maneuver our ways through the courts of heaven and get legal things arranged, so once we kind of move through the courts and get legal things in place, then God can freely grant us the passion of his heart. And then lastly, in the second half of the book, he talks about all the different voices in the courtroom as Robert understands them. He says there are many different voices in the courts of heaven, and our job is to understand these voices and come into agreement with them. Only as we join with these voices and release our faith in agreement with them will God's kingdom on earth be accomplished. If you want to know where Robert gets that concept, I would graciously say that it's a misapplication of dozens of passages that led him to this basic premise. Theology is something that is being worked out in each generation. As a generation comes onto the scene, like our generation right now, Robert's a part of our generation, they're constantly going back to the text. They're constantly evaluating their own experiences. They're constantly looking at the traditions they were handed, and they're trying to work out a practical theology for their day. That's just something that's a reality that we live in, that we, especially as church leaders, are a part of. And it's just my estimation that Robert misapplied several verses and biblical concepts to where what he then presents as his premise for prayer is something that is different than Christian prayer historically should be. And so it's not been something that we've adopted as a ministry or as a church family. We have friends that do, and we don't blame them for that. But just our choice in our family, in our house, that's been a choice that we've made. So my kind of big two reasons why we have not endorsed or used this idea of prayer heavily in our midst is that the courts of heaven overly complicates prayer by applying every aspect of our Western legal system to prayer. Like you got to bring testimony and evidence and restraining orders in prayer and legal rights and witnesses and annulments and pleas and verdicts and sentencing and statutes of limitations and arguments for and arguments against. You got to relearn all of how Christian prayer has been articulated historically. And so I think it overcomplicates how Jesus presents prayer in the Gospels. And then it overcomplicates, but I think it also oversimplifies prayer. It oversimplifies prayer by stating that the only reason good prayers are not answered is because legally something is resisting you. I just think that there's maybe lots of other reasons why sometimes our prayers are not answered, why sometimes the Lord gives a yellow light instead of a green light to our prayers. So, what is the court? What is the court? Very simply, the court are those who serve Yahweh by witnessing, executing, and implementing his divine justice and righteousness. Yahweh has chosen a world in which he does not rule alone. That's how he's chosen to build the world that we live in. And so he has a court, a group of individuals and of leaders with him who witness to all that's happening in the earth and then verify that Yahweh is righteous and true when he makes a sentence and when he makes a decision. That's what the court is. In the books, we've talked about the books. So, the one on the throne room is a judge. The throne room is a courtroom where other individuals witness to the Lord's actions. Number 3, there is more than one throne in the throne room! Exclamation point. This is the first time we've seen this. We've been looking at this throne room now this is our 8th week, and we've never seen more than one throne. But Daniel looks up in his dream, and he says, wait a minute, there's the fiery throne room chariot. There's Yahweh on his chariot with wheels. It's made of fire. But then that's not the only throne there. There's other thrones there. There's more than one throne in the throne room. What a revelation. Later, John will see 24 thrones surrounding the one throne. Multiple thrones in the throne room. It is the Lord's good pleasure to give thrones to others right beside his throne. It is the Lord's good pleasure to give thrones right beside his throne. And what's so shocking to Daniel was to see a human enter the throne room and receive the highest of honors, receive his own throne. And so it's enough to see Yahweh and to see all these divine beings with Yahweh, but then to see a man, a son of man, a man with hair and a man with blood and a man, probably not a very tall man, a Jewish man. He's seeing a man walk, being ushered into the throne room and being given the highest of honors, the man Jesus. God's ultimate plan for humanity was not just that a man would ascend and sit on a divine throne. That's a plan for humanity, that Jesus would ascend and sit on a divine throne, but that through Jesus, many humans, many sons of men would ascend and sit on thrones to rule on behalf of the Ancient of Days. This was God's ultimate plan. Not that just the Son of Man, Jesus, would conquer, rise from the dead, and be given power and authority and a throne, but that through him, many others, millions of others would also be able to ascend someday and be given power and authority and a throne to be right next to Yahweh's throne. If I can say it this way, Jesus is not overly possessive of his throne. He likes to share. Jesus is not overly possessive about his throne. He likes to share. Jesus liked to remind his men when they were on the earth that one day they would have thrones themselves and that he was preparing them to rule. Look at how he said it to the guys on one instance. Jesus says, men, just as my Father has granted me a kingdom, I now grant you the right to eat and drink at my table in my kingdom, and you will sit on thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. So as he's leading James and Judas, not the bad Judas, the other good Judas, and Bartholomew and Matthew and Peter and James and John, as he's leading these guys around, he understands that I'm not just discipling you to become a rabbi yourself. I'm preparing you to sit on a throne. What dignity. What honor. But this is what's in Jesus' mind as he's walking these guys around. One day you're going to sit on a throne. Jesus could say that to Peter, and I can say that to Chris with the exact same amount of confidence. One day you're going to sit on a throne, and you're going to rule. And it's going to be a throne next to Yahweh's throne, and you'll rule on his behalf. Whew. Now, lest you think I'm being misapplying the text, look at this. If this wasn't in the Bible, I don't know if I would believe it. The fact that it's in the Bible is the reason why I believe it. Because without this Bible verse, this concept almost sounds blasphemous. But look at what came out of the lips of Jesus himself. Revelation 3:21. The one who conquers, I will grant him and her, Destiny, I will grant him and her to sit with me on my throne. Believers, if we conquer this life and stay in the faith and trust in Jesus and make it to heaven, then we're going to sit with Jesus on his throne. Jesus says, as I also conquered and sat down with my Father on his throne. So Jesus was just the first one. He was just the first Son of Man that would be given a throne and be given power and authority to rule with Yahweh, because he created a universe in which he doesn't want to rule alone. That's remarkable. Ken and I used to teach at the same school in Cherryville, Indiana, and there's this thing called orientation. And orientation is where, for a week, we would gather, and different experienced teachers would get up and would say, "Okay, all you teachers," Ken and I were in the group. Let's remind ourselves how great of a privilege it is to be a teacher, and what a lesson plan should look like, and what discipline should look like. And it was kind of like here, you've been off all summer, and here's like a week just to get back into the swing of things. Okay, that's what orientation was. And I swear, like every year, there would be somebody who would get up, and they would give some like quote from the past, and they'd be like, "You know what you should do, John? When you go into the classroom as a teacher, look at every student as if they could be the next president of the United States," right? And like that was a way of like these lenses to put on to say, okay, little Johnny is driving me crazy, but he could be the president of the United States someday, and so I'm going to honor little Johnny. Did it ever work, Ken? No, it never really worked for us, right? Maybe because it was not rooted in reality. But here's a reality that we can be steadfast in. It came from the lips of Jesus, that every saint, every believer, every Christian, one day will be given a throne to sit on. I thought about Clark when I was writing out this note. Clark, one day, will sit on a throne and rule over people, nations, angels. It says that humans in the future state in the kingdom will rule over angels. Clark will be able to look down at Raphael or Gabriel or Michael and say, "Hey guys, go do this." And Michael the archangel would listen to Clark and say, "So be it. We'll do." I don't know what he'll say. I don't know how he'll respond. "Yes, sir." Maybe he'll say yes, sir to Clark, right? What dignity. What privilege. We can look at our children and know, just as Jesus looked at his men, and he says, "I'm preparing you to sit on a throne." We're training our children. One day they will sit on thrones. And the experiences in their life right now is preparing them for what they'll rule like and what they'll rule over. So look at your own circumstances in your own life, your hardships. Look at your own circumstances, the family you were born in, what your home life was like. Look at your own circumstances, the sins you've had to overcome. Look at your own circumstances and say, "Lord, you know that I'm going to sit on a throne someday, and I believe this is a part of the throne that you're preparing for me, the rule that you're preparing for me. I remember prophesying over one of our ladies one time on a Wednesday night back there in the back. And I saw her as a little princess who had got up in the morning and wanted to just go play outside. But no, she had to put the book on her head, to learn how to walk properly. You ever do that? You have to walk right? Okay. I saw her with the book on her head so that she learned good posture as she was walking, And she had to do all these things. And she thought, how is this preparing me to be a queen someday? Right? This seems so trivial and frivolous. But the king and the queen knew exactly what they were doing. He said, listen to your trainers. Do what they say. I know you're only 8 and you want to go play on the slide, but you have to do this training because we're preparing for you to sit on a throne someday. And to that woman that I prophesied over, I said, the things in your life right now that you wish weren't there are preparing you for your throne someday. You're going to be a specific type of ruler over a specific type of people in the kingdom forever. And it has a direct correlation to what you're going through right now in your life. There are thrones in the throne room. This is the joy of Christ's discipleship. The joy of discipleship is to take somebody, to train them, and to train them to do what you do. Is that not the joy of discipleship? Here's how Jesus said it. Jesus said, a disciple is not above his teacher. So the 12 disciples are not above Jesus. The disciple is not above his teacher. But everyone, when he is fully trained, will be like his teacher. Every disciple, when he's fully trained, will be like his teacher. And you, when you're fully developed, Dustin and Joe, when you guys are fully developed in the faith, you'll be just like Jesus. You won't be Jesus, but you'll be just like him. And so he, in his final act of disciple making in you, will give you a throne. And he'll say, you guys are ready to rule because I have fully trained you. I have been fully formed in you. What dignity. There are thrones in the throne room because the Lord, in his good pleasure, has decided not to rule this world alone. He wants to do it with us. Lastly, number 4. The authority of Jesus is paramount in the throne room. Kind of the last scene was the scene of the Father, the Ancient of Days, giving Jesus dominion and glory and honor and authority and sovereignty and all these words. Let's just sum it all up into authority. The Greek word exousia, which is a very important word to Jesus. Authority. In this scene, we see authority being delegated to a human. The Father is delegating his authority to a human being, a son of man, the man. He delegates his authority to a human. Jesus was worthy to receive it because of what he did in the earth. Likewise, through salvation, Jesus has made us worthy to also walk in his authority. Authority can be delegated. This is one of the great things that Jesus did on the earth, was to delegate his authority to his apostles. He found such joy in doing it. He had received authority from the Father, and he was able to delegate that authority to his men so that they could preach the kingdom effectively, drive out demons, heal the sick, and a list of other kingdom things. But those are the big 3. The authority of Jesus is paramount in the throne room. It saturates our songs. It dominates our songs. We sing about it all the time in this house, which is so fitting because the authority of Jesus is something that everybody in the throne room is aware of. That guy, he's got all the authority and the power. And the only authority and power that we have has been delegated to us from him. He's worthy. His authority. Much of the Christian life, much of your Christian life and Christian development is learning how to cooperate with Jesus and his authority. It's not enough for the church to simply recognize Christ's authority, but that's important. We must recognize his authority. It's not enough for us to just sing about his authority, although that's important and it's fun, and the Holy Spirit was just doing all sorts of things in me as I was celebrating his authority during that song set. It was wild. It was beautiful. It's not just enough, though, for us to sing about his authority or to ponder his authority, which I like to do, On my face, in prayer time, I like to ponder his authority and all the implications of it. But he has called us and commissioned us to walk in his authority. Now, to walk in his authority, to pray in his authority, to cast out demons in his authority, to live the Christian life on offense, not constantly on defense. To live the Christian life on offense, because he's delegated to us authority, and to destroy the works of the devil in the arenas that we live in. That's why the Son of Man was sent into the earth, John says. Why did the Son of God come? Why did the Son of Man come? To destroy the works of the devil. And that's a week-by-week thing. That's a last week of November type of a thing. That's a this week type of a thing. It's not just a spirit-forward thing. That's a this week thing. That's a today thing. That's an in our homes thing. Right? That's a now thing. Yes, it's in the Rafa rooms, but it's in our homes. It's in our private conversations. It's in our text message threads. It's walking in authority. When you recognize a demon, praying against it. Every chance you can, stand in your authority and pray and partner with Jesus in the heavenlies to see things happen in your generation. When somebody is sick, you don't just say, I'm sorry. When somebody is sick, you don't just say, I'll pray for you. But when somebody is sick, as one who's been delegated authority, you say the 7 magic words, right? May I pray for you right now. Hand out, activate, right? May I pray for you right now. Why? Because Daniel had this dream 2,600 years ago in which he saw the Son of Man enter in before the Ancient of Days and was given all power and authority. And then when Jesus came down here on earth, he lived a perfect life. And then he went up to heaven and he received that in its fullness from the Father. Then he came back down to earth and he stood before his men and he said, all power and authority, Matthew 28, all exousia, the same thing he received from the Ancient of Days. He said, all exousia, all authority has been given to me in heaven and earth, and I've delegated it to you. So go out, make disciples, and teach in my name, right? Demonstrate the kingdom. And so this is an everyday thing. This is an every week thing. We walk in authority. We live in authority. Because Daniel, 2,600 years ago, saw it happen in a prophetic form. And Jesus says, it's now. And this is our generation. This is our time. He's given it to us. And there's broken people in our family. There's broken people in our workplace. There's broken people at Kroger. There's broken people at the restaurant we go to. And they don't know how to get out of their brokenness. And it takes a group of people who understand their authority, who understand the power that's inside of them, to exercise that authority, destroy the works of the devil. It's a this week thing. So let's do it this week.